getting the smell of the warm summer air. I live in a town where you can't smell a thing. You watch your feet for cracks in the pavement. Up above, aliens hover, making home movies for the folks back home. Of all these weird creatures who lock up their spirits, draw holes in themselves, and live for the secrets. Hello, conspiracy players. Welcome to another episode. On this very special Father's Day edition of Conspiracy Playtime, we have one father and one non-father. Maybe a future father. I don't know. We could ask how he feels about that when we start the interview.
Maybe someday.
All right, Ryder Lee, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, my friend. It's been, I like your poster in the background, A Clockwork Orange. That's what my second documentary is going to be about.
You know, I kind of was going to ask you about that. I heard you on some other podcasts talking about you're working on like an MK Ultra Hollywood Kubrick thing right now.
Yeah, it's going to be incredible. I'm really looking forward to it. I originally wanted to make the documentary that I'm making right now first, but we decided to go with JFKX, Solving the Crime of the Century first, which you can check out on Amazon Prime, and you can watch it for free on Tubi as well. It's on like 25 different streaming platforms. But yeah, this next one is going to be all about Hollywood, MK Ultra, Stanley Kubrick, The Shining, The Clockwork Orange, and it's going to be mind-blowing. So hopefully it'll be finished by the end of August.
You know, those are a lot of my favorite topics right there. I love the old Hollywood stuff, Laurel Canyon stuff.
Oh man, we got a huge section on Laurel Canyon and Lookout Mountain.
Oh, and Kubrick, you know, probably filmed the moon landing there. I don't know. That's kind of what I speculate, but
yeah, my producer of the documentary, Jay Widener, he's the one that created that theory. He started that theory.
Really?
With Kubrick's Odyssey. Kubrick's Odyssey 1 and 2, he started the theory that Stanley Kubrick faked the moon landing.
Sweet.
And then everyone has copied off of him and then created this whole thing, but he's really humble in a lot of aspects, and he just likes the information to get out there, so he doesn't call a lot of people on it when it's become really popular in the past couple of years now. Like a lot of TikTok videos, and a lot of people just post it and don't even know where it comes from, or where the original idea come from, but it came from a Kubrick's Odyssey and Jay Widener.
Yeah, wasn't there some weird movie on Netflix? Room 23. What room? The hotel room in The Shining.
He was also in that documentary as well.
Oh, he was. Yeah. Okay, so
that was him. That was him that talked about it. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about you a little bit. You're a researcher, documentarian, and podcaster. You kind of have your fingers in a lot of pies here. So you want to like kind of talk about how you stumbled into all this? Is it something you've always been into?
Well, I've always been in the weird and strange things. Growing up, I was, I had some experiences that, I don't talk about because there's really no point in really actually talking about it, because I don't know what it is, and it doesn't really matter to me what it is. I think unexplainable things happen all the time in our reality, and sometimes we're not meant to know what it is. And any attempt to actually figure it out just furthers you down into theory and speculation. And that's not me saying that theory and speculation is bad, but, if I were to talk about some of my experiences to some people within the community, which I have, they try and tell you what you experienced. You know what I mean? They'll be like, yeah, it was gray aliens. They were abducting you. They were freaking doing a DNA switch on you and all this stuff, and you were on a ship, and they come by every couple of years to check up on you. And I'm like, no, that's not what's happened at all. But that's the kind of group hive mentality that's going on with the community. Like, they try and insert their own ideas and thoughts and beliefs and theories onto you to get you a part of this whole group of people, when 9 times out of 10 Nobody experiences that type of stuff, and which we'll get into later on with regressions and like all that, because it's a big sham as well. But anyway, I just kind of like fell into it. I watched, the movie Zeitgeist when it came out in 2008. I think that's when it came out, around that time, around that area. Don't quote me 100%. I have so many thoughts.
Sounds about right.
I have so many dates and so many things that I got to remember in my head. But I watched that movie and I was like, oh wow, like it's all a bunch of nonsense, because it gets into the money, the currency, 9/11, religion, and then because I always knew that there was something wrong with the way that our society operates. Things didn't seem right, and I knew that from a very young age. I was like, why are these people so disingenuous? Like, why are they hiding something from me? It feels like they're all hiding something from me. They're not telling me exactly what's going on. So then that just took me down a whole path of getting into research and going deep down and getting into spirituality. That's the main reason that I started my show Raised by Giants. Was that was the original thought, was spirituality, because I was like, well, how do we fix a lot of the problems and the things that we have going on in our society? And I was like, well, if people would just become more spiritual and more in tune with themselves and stop looking to outside sources to save them, then I think things would get better. And I still believe in that, but a lot of the spiritual community is full of a bunch of gobbledygook nonsense, new age garbage as well. And that's what I figured out with all of the communities. They're all like that. All of them are filled with just a bunch of nonsense. But that's where I started, was with the spiritual community. And I thought that all these people knew what they were talking about, and I thought that they practiced what they said that they did. Like they're on here talking about, oh, well, I do this, I do that, I contact my spirit guides, the extraterrestrials come down and meet me in my home, and I have conversations with them, and blah, 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 blah. And at first it sounds fascinating, and it sounds like, oh, well, maybe they are telling the truth. Maybe they are in contact with something. But the more you look at it, the more you realize it's a bunch of nonsense, and they're just making shit up. And they don't do any of the things that they say that they do. It's like it's been all wrapped into this freaking spiritual new age nonsense. And then I was like, okay, well, where does a lot of these thoughts and a lot of these ideas come from? And then I started getting into cults, into UFO cults. And I tracked back the cult of I Am all the way back to the 30s with a guy named Edna Ballard. And you realize that is where a lot of this stuff started. So with a guy named Edna Ballard with the cult of I Am in the early 30s. They had all of these concepts wrapped up into their cult that people talk about to this very day. Like twin flames. It wasn't called twin flames back then, it was called twin rays. Mm-hmm. Like all of these different thoughts and ideas that have just been morphed and then changed into something different and kind of renamed, but is very similar for a new generation of people. And I studied all these cults, looked at all of them, all the UFO cults, and there's a big boom in the early 50s. You got the Ashtar Galactic Command cult, you have the Seekers UFO cult, you have the Unarius Academy cult, and it seems like that what a lot of people are regurgitating are the exact same beliefs and the same structures from these cults. And especially with the Heaven's Gate cult, like a lot of the things that Marshall Applewhite was talking about, and you can find all of that information. He recorded like hundreds and hundreds of sessions where he's just talking and talking and talking. Very interesting things that he's saying, but when you realize that what he's saying, other people have just changed and turned just slightly, and then it's become a part of their belief system and their belief structure as well. So,
well, with these cults you're talking about right now, do you ever in your research uncover military intelligence or just basic intelligence connections with any or all of them?
Not directly, but I mean indirectly, because it all started in the early 50s. There was that big boom, and that's right when the MK Ultra programs, the CIA started the MK Ultra programs. So there's an inadvertent connection there, but nothing that really connects them directly to. I mean, there's a few of them that, like the Order of the Solar Temple in Geneva, Switzerland, which was a very prominent cult and would only accept members that had a lot of money. That was like high up.
Sounds a little bit like Scientology.
Sort of. And so it's not out of the realm of possibility that a lot of the followers of some of these cults could have been in positions of power. They could have been CIA representatives. They could have been military assets. They could have been three-letter organization people. So they really got a lot of well-known. I mean, if you look at David Grush and the Waco, the Branch Davidians.
Oh, Koresh?
Yeah. Sorry, I get him.
Yeah, when you said
Grush, David Grush, because they're very, very similar, and no one has really put that together. I've been trying to say that for a long time, since Dave Grush came out, the UFO whistleblower. Right. I was like, because right whenever he came out, I was in like a huge, big, deep dive into Waco.
Okay.
And I was like, this guy, his name sounds exactly like David Koresh. Dave Grush, Dave Koresh. So
yeah,
it's almost identical. And I was like, is no one putting this together?
Yeah, if you say it in a hurry, there's no difference between them, really. Yeah, I didn't think of that either.
But he has, he had a lot of, like, he had like lawyers, and like, yeah, the mailman was a follower of the Branch Davidian.
Isn't he the one who tipped him off too? The mailman?
Well, yeah, he's the one that came in to the compound and was like, yeah, they're getting ready to mount an attack. So, I mean, there's so many different correlations, and that's another thing that people's like, well, how can these, high up individuals get involved in this kind of stuff? And, with the Heaven's Gate cult, a lot of the people that came and said, well, how did you get involved in this and all that? And they're like, well, it's because it was something that I never heard before, and I found it so interesting, and I started following it, and I got into it. And then the Heaven's Gate got into like all this androgynous stuff. They started making people dress androgynous, and men couldn't have beards, women couldn't have long hair. Weren't
many of the men castrated that were in Heaven's Gates?
I believe it was 5 of them. They got chemically, well, it's up in the air if they were chemically castrated or another where they actually got cut. No one really knows, but I believe officially it was Marshall Applewhite, which was the head of the cult, and 5 of the followers traveled to Mexico and got castrated.
Now you could just do that over the counter in America with all the hormone therapies you can get. It's crazy. They're a little bit ahead of the time.
That exactly, dude. And that is a part of the agenda, and everything that he was talking about, and how he wanted to form and structure everyone and get everyone on like a regimented schedule where they can only have a certain amount of food at a certain time. They all had to dress the same way. They got the same rations, the same portions. There was a list of rules and guidelines that you have to follow. He wanted all the followers to be very robotic. He even changed the names of all of the followers. He changed them to Odie, so the last name was always Odie. Well, he combined the first like 3 letters of their name along with Odie.
Okay.
So it'd be like Ryodie if I was a Heaven's Gate cult follower. He would have changed my name to Ryodie.
Now, was this technically a UFO cult because they believed they were going to hop on behind the comet as it passed by, or is it kind of its own thing?
I classified as a UFO call because the whole premise of what they talked about was that a ship was going to come down and ascend them into the ship, and then that they would then be transformed into an extraterrestrial and live forever in the level above human.
Okay.
So that was their whole thing. But then it started to kind of fall apart whenever Bonnie Nettles died.
Right.
She died of brain cancer.
And that was his kind of significant other, but not really, because they were supposedly asexual. I guess you can have relationships without fucking, but I don't know. Seems weird to me.
Yeah, and whenever she died and she didn't ascend up into the next level above human in an intergalactic spaceship, people are like, what's going on here? What are you doing? So then he just started clamping down like hardcore. He made it about like a spiritual ascension and started talking about how we're just vessels and we're like a skin suit, and our consciousness is inside of the skin suit that allows us to animate this body and go around, and then whenever we die, our consciousness, our physical body dies. It doesn't transform into an extraterrestrial and the next level, evolutionary level above human. Our physical body dies, but our consciousness goes on.
So were they expecting her to make contact and she didn't? So they were like, hey, what the hell's going on here? So they
they'd been preaching this idea that if you're a follower of this cult and you follow their strict guidelines and listen to what they say and you believe it, that you're going to physically ascend into a spacecraft when you die.
Okay.
Then you'll be transformed into an immortal extraterrestrial.
So had she not died, it's very possible that the mass suicide would have not taken place as it did, maybe as soon as it did, or if at all.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a high possibility that it wouldn't have happened the way that it did if she wouldn't have died. But they all change up their beliefs and their doctrine when something unexpected occurs that they can't really explain. They then switch it and change it and to kind of edit out what they were saying before. And then they keep the whole thing going. Like the Order of the Solar Temple with Joseph DeMambro. He got caught faking apparitions with smoke and mirrors and like freaking all this stuff during their initiation ceremony, because that was a way to get the initiates to believe that he really was in contact with the Brotherhood, right? So whenever they were doing this Masonic ritualistic initiation into their cult, they would fake an apparition that the initiate would 100% see, and then that would solidify that it's real. And they would become a devout follower, and then they would give all their money to the cult. And then he got caught up because his daughter ratted him out. He was like, "Hey, you're faking all this stuff, and I know that you're faking it." So he then, in order to cover that up, he started saying that all the followers were very important people. They were all reincarnations of famous saints throughout history, which is another motif that the Heaven's Gate cult did as well. He started saying that all of the followers of the cult were, which he claimed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ himself, Marshall Applewhite from the Heaven's Gate.
Really? He said that? Oh, wow.
And he said that all of the followers were all of his disciples back whenever he was Jesus.
Okay.
And that Bonnie Nettles was Mary Magdalene.
Oh, that's starting to sound familiar now. Okay.
And they were the two from the Book of Revelations. You know, it's just it's another thing to like hook people in. You know, like when one thing doesn't work out, they're like, "Oh, well, how do we switch this up and change it and work it to our benefit?"
I see a lot
Huh.
of big podcasts doing that. Like,
Yes.
oh, this market's big now, so I'm going to become this guy. And then, like, you cast a wide enough net, where you can get a lot more attention that way. And some of it might be, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, legit, I guess. Like, they're truthful about it. But I see, like, Christianity right now is really big, and a lot of podcasters are having reawakenings into Christianity. And maybe it is all genuine. I don't know, but it's kind of convenient that you see the whole MAGA movement kind of shifted conspiracy into a conservative religious type area, where all the new conspiracy theorists these days are kind of in that crowd. So you see a lot of the big content creators kind of making that shift.
Yeah, they've turned into political pundits.
Yeah.
So weird, dude. I don't know when this switch happened. It had to have happened in around 2015 to
I think that's
2016.
dead on. Yeah. And then, of course, the Q movement brought in a whole bunch of others, but it was already happening before that. That was kind of the icing on the shit cake.
Yeah, I'm glad that you recognize that, because I've seen that as well. Like, because back whenever I was looking into a lot of this stuff, it was just straight wild and wacky conspiracy theories. And that was the fun part of it. Like, you knew that a lot of it was nonsense, but it was fun to listen to.
But none of it was pro-government.
None of these people are fun to listen to anymore.
Right.
Like, I don't listen to anybody. Hardly.
It can be tough. Yeah.
I mean, I'll put in Joe Rogan because I like Joe Rogan. Like, that's really about it. But anybody else, dude, like, I just, like, I don't get it. Like, I don't really understand it. And people can come at me whatever with Joe Rogan. I really don't care. I've always listened to him, and he's a critical mind. He thinks differently. He actually pulls up evidence, and people say that he's a psyop and he's controlled opposition. Who the fuck cares? Like, I really don't care. I think that what he's putting out is solid information, and he tries to verify that information. He tries to pull it up and come to a solid conclusion.
What was your take on the Terrence Howard stuff? Did you get into any of that?
I didn't really get into it. I listened to it.
Yeah. To me, I think it was Isaac Weishaupt who even probably was on Tinfoil Hat that he said it. He's just like, he needs to learn to dumb down his material, or else I'm just going to think he's full of shit. And I don't think that's always easy for, like, if this guy is a legit genius, they don't realize that they need to dumb down their stuff oftentimes. So I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I think that the whole conspiracy movement these days there's a lot of pro-government inside of it, which was antithetical to everything I ever thought about with conspiracy stuff.
Exactly. It went from, we never trust the government, we don't let the government tell us what to do, they're in charge of everything, to now being in full swing, full pro government. It's wild. It's like the punk movement. If you remember the punk movement, like back in the 90s, like late 80s into the 90s, they were like all against government, and now they're all for government.
Yeah, all of the bring the system down bands of the 90s were the ones that were pushing the vax the hardest, like all of them.
That's right. It's wild whenever you think about it. And I think you're right in saying that the QAnon thing kind of pushed a lot of people in that direction, but it's just really strange. And also with the taking down of a lot of people's shows and the YouTube purging, I think it's difficult for new people to really figure out where a lot of this stuff started. Like, I was looking for Jim Marrs things online the other day because I was making a short video because I mentioned him, and I wanted to put him in the short video of the reel, and I typed in Jim Marrs on YouTube. Nothing on Jim Marrs.
I saw you live last night talking about how you had gone on the hunt for this old Alex Jones Joe Rogan clip, and it was almost impossible to find. Like, I have a lot of similar events happen where I know I saw this, And I never think to back things up because you don't know what they're going to take down. So did you get affected personally by any of this YouTube censorship or the big purge?
No, I didn't, because I didn't start my channel until 2020, and I made it all about spirituality. So
you made it through the whole COVID censorship thing.
Yeah, because I didn't mention it. I didn't say it, didn't talk about it, because I wanted to be safe with it, because I'm not going to be a martyr. I mean, if people don't know what was going on with COVID by now, they're not going to know now. There's literally no point in talking about it now, because the people that already know what's going on already know what's going on. The people that don't know what's going on, they're not going to change.
No. Yeah, I think very similarly to that. Okay, so when we were just on the topic, I think it's a good segue, because we're talking about people being like, not so much as pro-government, but they'll actually take the government's perspective at face value, such as the big disclosure movement that's kind of recently unfolding before our very eyes, to where, I don't know, what you could tie that into this big psyop that you have been looking into lately, if you can, or we could go back even further than that. I don't know where you want to start.
Yeah, I mean, we have we've let the UFO and the extraterrestrial speculation go so far out of hand that I personally believe that it serves to make people easily fooled by scammers, grifters, fraudsters that really prefer a lie and bring zero evidence and zero proof to what they're talking about. And this could mean that any group or individual or government could use this modern myth of UFOs and extraterrestrials that could be used to, for the lack of a better word, undermine our society through the deceptiveness, mis and disinformation surrounding ufology. Because when you track back all this stuff and you really get into the weeds on where a lot of these thoughts and theories, just like what I was talking about with the UFO cults, and how that has morphed and changed into a lot of the new age thoughts and ideas and philosophy. The UFO mis and disinformation that has come directly from the government has shaped and molded ufology. And this current contactee movement really started with a gentleman named Samuel Eaton Thompson in 1950. that no one talks about because they've never even heard his name. And this is connected also with Kenneth Arnold, but Samuel Eaton Thompson in 1950 claimed that he was driving in Washington State and he saw a strange craft and that there was beings outside of the craft, children, and he walked up to the craft. They invited him into the craft. They told him that they were Venetians, that they were vegetarians, that they are here to that they just randomly came by Earth, and that a lot of their other people that try to visit Earth, their ships are shot down by military weapons, but somehow they made it, and that in the year of, I believe it was the year 5000. I'd have to look it up, so don't quote me, but the year 5000 is when Jesus Christ is supposed to return. Right?
So we got a while.
We got a while to wait. Okay, Jesus isn't coming back for at least another 3,000 years. Okay, so don't be thinking that this end of the world yet. We got a lot of more lives to go before we get to the Jesus Christ return, right? But no one ever talks about these people because the story was really overshadowed by Kenneth Arnold sightings in 1947, and then later on Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. Just like who I was mentioning earlier, George Van Tassel with the Ashtar Galactic Command cult in 1952, or George King from the Aetherius Society cult, or Dorothy Martin from the Seekers UFO cult in 1954, that made several predictions that didn't come true. And she made this prediction that in the year of 1953, December 23rd of 1953, a UFO was going to land and save us from a big natural disaster that was getting ready to happen, and that we would be saved by this extraterrestrial race. So then a psychiatrist infiltrated into the group and to study their behaviors whenever the predictions didn't come true. He was the actual person that coined the term cognitive dissonance. Everyone's heard that term, cognitive dissonance. Well, they don't know that it came from a freaking studying a UFO cult, the Seekers UFO cult, Dorothy Martin, from 1954. So all of these supposed, this contactee movement has brought about a wave of theories and speculations that can really be tied to the rise and the popularization of the extraterrestrial myth, which is a huge aspect of ufology that literally no one wants to talk about, and it's a huge issue, and it is steeped in mental illness and drug addiction and drug abuse. Right? Well, and it really starts with Kenneth Arnold, which was the first in modern times to see a UFO, and the mis and disinformation and the misquote that Kenneth Arnold said that he said wasn't really true. See, Kenneth Arnold said that he was flying this plane in Washington, D.C. in 1947. He saw a string of craft, up to 9, I believe it was. And then he landed his plane in Yakima, Washington. He talked to some of his friends. His friends said,
"Okay, so you said Washington D.C. So this was Washington State, where he's flying." State. Okay, I'm sorry. Did I say? You said D.C. and I was kind of confused just because I had heard you talk about this on another show. So it's Washington State. Okay,
my bad.
So,
if I said Washington,
that's okay.
DC, Washington,
no
DC.
worries.
I've had a lot of things that I need to remember, but it's Washington State.
Okay.
So, and it's important to realize that a lot of the things that, a lot of the sightings from back in the day, they weren't, there were shields, there were pillars, there were flying chariots, and it's important to talk about that because I realize the history of this stuff. But just because I don't mention it doesn't mean that I don't know about it, right? And you always have that one person that's like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. There's been history of these UFOs way back in the day, blah, 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 blah. And, he's full of shit. Well, I know about all that stuff, but it wasn't flying saucers back then. They were seeing something different. And that gets into Carl Jung's perspective on what UFOs are and how it's like a projection of what we're going through at that time, and the things that we know about and the things that we've experienced. So people out on the battlefield seeing a disc in the sky or the sun. I mean, there's people back in the day that thought that the sun that would come up was a UFO. They called it a disc. The disc comes up in the morning and then it sets at night. And through those times and through the experiences that these people have had, they correlate something that they see psychologically in the sky to what's going on during their time.
Mm-hmm.
And but back to Kenneth Arnold. So
I think he's landing in Yakima, Washington when I cut you off to ask about DC.
So he landed in Yakima, Washington. He told his friend Al Baxter about the sighting. Arnold then shared a story with other pilots that said maybe what he had saw was military missiles, and they claimed that maybe it was a military craft. And Arnold, he didn't really believe these explanations that these other people and his friends and other pilots were telling him that he saw. So the next day he walked into a news station and told the story to a gentleman named Nolan Skiff. Now, Nolan published a short article with the headline that said something like impossible, but maybe seeing is believing. And the story was then forwarded to the Associated Press, and then it got worldwide distribution. And from that point, the term flying saucer was born. And when you look at Arnold's testimony, which he did a lot of interviews, he did a lot of radio shows, he never used the term flying saucer to describe the shape of the craft, right? He said that the shape was bat-shaped, crescent-shaped, boomerang-shaped, half-moon-shaped, and he said that a lot of what people said that he had saw were misunderstood. Like a lot of what the newspapers in the headlines were creating the term flying saucer, when he said that he never said that the shape of the craft was a flying saucer. And then he worked really hard up until the end of his life, I believe in 1984, to really combat the flying saucer narrative. But the problem is it became such a frenzy topic, and then other people started to report seeing the same thing. See, it just takes one person to see something really strange and really weird, and then other people jump on board and claim that they've seen the exact same thing. It's kind of like with Whitley Strieber and his book Communion with the gray aliens. Nobody talked about gray aliens up until the point that that book came out. And same with Bud Hopkins in his book Missing Time. No one talked about missing time until his book came out on missing time and related what people were experiencing to UFO abductions, to extraterrestrial abductions. Right, so it just takes one person and it blow up in order to create this entire frenzy, and then it doesn't matter if people saw the same thing or not, they're going to say that they saw the same thing. And then when you get into what was the term flying saucer before, what was that used for before 1947, and Kenneth Arnold in these newspapers coming out and saying that Kenneth Arnold saw a flying saucer, which I'm going to get into here in a few minutes, but I don't want to get off track. So the media took the saucer title and they just ran with it. And they created all these headlines. Saucer-shaped craft were spotted, when Arnold literally never referred to the shape of the craft as saucer and shaped. Again, it was bat-shaped, crescent-shaped, moon-shaped, shaped like a pie pan, and a pie pan or a pie plate. And in 1960, Arnold came out with a drawing of the craft he saw, and it's bat-shaped, circular, winged in the back. And you would think with Arnold coming out with this drawing of the craft, it would really stop everyone from continuing to talk about flying saucers. But it didn't, because too much time had passed in between him seeing it and talking about it and then the artist rendition coming out. It was just kind of ignored because the flying saucer talk had become such a popular thing that there was like no stopping it. It was a train that was heading for a crash, and there was no stopping that train, right? So on April 7th, 1950, Arnold spills the beans on all the flying saucer misrepresentation and misquote. Arnold said that the objects that he witnessed fluttered like they were boats on really rough water. And he said that they flew like a saucer thrown across water. And most of the newspapers at that time misunderstood and misquoted him, saying that the shape of the craft was saucer in shape, when Arnold said that they flew like saucers thrown across water.
So this misquoted him 10 years before he came out with the drawings then?
Yeah, well, it was... Yeah, he came out with the drawing in, I believe, 1960.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's still like trying to get this point across after all this time. That's crazy. That no one's listening to him.
Yeah, he said that they flew like saucers skipping across water, and the headline said that they were saucer in shape. Right? And that's probably the biggest misquote of all time. You know, and he also claimed that he had several other sightings after that, which, you know, we don't really know if they were real or not, because he probably seen the public interest was peaking really big and he wanted to try and one-up himself. It's kind of like making a sequel to a movie, right? You want to make the sequel to the movie bigger and better than the first one. And that's probably what he was trying to do, but none of the other sightings ever gained any kind of traction because it had taken off and other people were experiencing the same thing. But he also quoted that what other people were experiencing at that time were not the same, or they were nothing at all. So if people would have just listened to Kenneth Arnold from the beginning, they'd realize that a lot of this stuff is nonsense. And then you get into what the term flying saucer actually was before it was associated with UFOs. And this is a mind bender because a lot of people that know about this don't even know what to think about it. It's perplexing. So before it was associated with UFOs, flying saucers was a sport. And this sport predated Arnold sightings by over 60 years, which was called trap shooting, which was started in the late 1800s as a way to train hunters and shooters, in which they would release live birds from a cage, use them as target practice, and then later it was changed to these little clay flat discs. I'm sure that if people aren't familiar with trap shooting, you've probably seen it in a movie or something, like an old school movie where, you know, rich and sophisticated people would, you know, throw up these clay pigeons, and they would have a shotgun or a gun or whatever, and they would shoot the clay pigeon and explode it. So a man by the name of Charles Lewitsky in 1880, he was the one that dubbed these little clay pigeons flying saucers. I hope you see where this is going. So
yeah,
by the early 1900s, flying saucers, which are now clay pigeons, have become a very popular sport. There were competitions, championships, and there was newspaper headlines that would say that the skies of North America are covered in flying saucers flying through the air, exploding and falling to Earth. And they even look like what the commonly accepted version of what people think a UFO is.
Yes.
It's the exact replica of the phrases that everyone thought several decades later with Kenneth Arnold sighting, the Roswell sighting, and the sightings in the 50s. There's no way that that's just a coincidence.
Right. And it would explain the need for the media machine to keep on track with the description of flying saucers, because clearly there's some intent behind this. We're already seeded, our minds are already seeded with these things, and once you you program somebody, that is, you just accept it a lot easier. And like you said, the imagery is just spot on.
It is. It's unbelievable. And by the 1900s, the name flying saucers, by the early 1900s, it had become such a commonplace name. It had been being used for over 2 decades, the sport of flying saucers. You know, it became so popular, it was even adopted by the Olympics in 1916.
Now, let me ask you, did they change the name of the original flying saucer to clay pigeon after Kenneth Arnold's story? Because it was just like, well, we can't call them flying saucers anymore because that's this other thing.
It fell out of favor whenever the military adopted it to train their soldiers in target practice in the beginning of World War II.
Okay.
So whenever America got involved in World War II, which I think is 1942, somewhere around in there. I think it's 1942 or 1940. It was late. We entered the war really late. But the Air Force adopted the clay pigeons, which were called flying saucers, and then that fell out of favor within the public.
Okay.
So people stopped doing it because the military took it over. And then with Kenneth Arnold's sightings 2 years after the war ends in 1945, then it gets a rebrand into these into flying saucers that are supposedly piloted by extraterrestrials.
Right. And I mean, we can't discount the Foo Fighter program that the Germans supposedly had going on. So it just made me think of that when you're training people to shoot flying saucers in the military. And I know, like, we could go down all sorts of crazy rabbit holes with the whole Foo Fighter program and Antarctica and all that, but that's another show.
Yeah, so we have the clay pigeons being called flying saucers since 1980. Hundreds of thousands of people being familiar with that term, but related to something different. The military adopted the term, and in the early 40s during World War II, 2 years after the war ended, we get the same term but under a different context. And it's important for me to also lay out that this book by a gentleman named Chris Albeck that I got a lot of this information from. I've had him on my show a couple of times now, but the name of his book is Saucers. You find it on Amazon. It's by Saucers by Chris Albeck, and he outlines all of this in great detail. He shows you all the newspaper articles, how big, how popular of a sport this flying saucers was. From back in the late 1800s, it shows you news headlines, how similar the discs are to that, and I just want to give him a shout out for that information. So really what we have here is that the entire subject of ufology is based on something that's a fallacy. And ufology has been using the shape of a round disc when it was never described by Arnold as a disc or a flying saucer. So that means that we've had the shape of this craft wrong for essentially 77 years.
And I mean, it's been reiterated in the culture, the pop culture, the fiction. Steven Spielberg's ran with it. I mean, you think of his alien craft and yeah,
the flying saucer mythology, it's a lie, it's a fallacy, it's a misnomer, and it's a misinterpreted misquote from newspaper reporters, the media, journalists, and researchers, and still the most popular symbol of ufology, even though it's not really called flying saucers anymore. I mean, I think a few people, they were trying to bring back the term, I don't know, a couple of months ago whenever I started really getting in. I seen Jeremy Corbell and a few other people started calling them flying saucers again, but it's a lie. That's never what they look like.
Yeah, now, so we went from UFOs and flying saucers to UAPs and Tic Tacs. That's in like a span of 80 years or whatever.
Now it's getting ready to shift again. It's getting ready to shift into USOs.
I heard you talking about this. So this is coming out of the ocean?
Yes.
And that's going to be the new thing. Everybody's going to be talking about aliens are not from outside of our atmosphere.
They're from here. Yeah, that's the new thing. Harvard scientist already came out with an article a couple of days ago talking about that. They're not from outer space. They're an ancient civilization from the planet.
Well, now we can get the flat earthers on board again with the aliens.
I mean, but that's a common thing because that's something that's been talked about for a really long time too, but never really put too much credence into it because people want to believe that we're not the only species in the universe, but they've heard that before. A lot of people have talked about that before, but just in a different way, right? They're like, oh well, they're here, they've always been here. There's alien human hybrids. They're among us. They're walking amongst us. So that was set up for what's about to happen with this USO push, with the crypto-terrestrial push, because people are tired of not seeing any evidence or not seeing any proof. So they have to change it just slightly. Exactly like what I was talking about with the cults earlier on.
Right, exactly.
In the conversation. When their predictions and their things that they're talking about doesn't come to fruition, they'll start getting tired of it not happening. They have to change it slightly.
And I think it might have been a conversation you were having with somebody actually a while back about Elon Musk saying that, yeah, we've got all these satellites up there and we've never had to veer around any kind of craft or anything on its way down here. So I don't think aliens are out there. And it's like, that guy, he's the tip of the spear when it comes to a lot of the way we shift these things. And also it made me think of James Cameron, who's a big purveyor of all the mythology. I mean, you get your AI stuff, he's in on alien stuff, but he made the movie The Abyss in the 80s, which was about alien activity under the ocean.
That's where it's going to shift because it has to, because You can't really go any further with outer space aliens.
And even these guys that were doing to get back to Grush, that were doing the congressional hearings, do they specifically say this is from outer space? They could just hop on this USO thing that you're talking about around the corner.
They don't. I don't think that either Captain Fravor or Ryan Graves really ever mentioned that they're from outer space.
Right.
Now, what they do say, which is what they always say and what they've always said from going back 20, 30 years, which is what they've said from Project Blue Book, Project Grudge, and all of those other governmental projects to investigate UFOs. They've been saying the same thing forever now, that the craft outmaneuver their craft. That we don't know what it is because it moves at speeds, it does maneuvers that we don't know of any current technology that can do this.
They mess with our radar.
That's been the stance that they've had since the beginning of all this. They've literally been saying the exact same thing this entire time. Nothing has changed. And people still don't get it. And then they say, oh, well, after each one of the big events, there's normally like a military official that comes out, normally someone from the Air Force, that's like, it was definitely done after the Washington Flap event of 1952. They have an Air Force official come out and say, oh, well, we don't have any reason to believe that this has anything to do with extraterrestrials. They're telling you right to your face that it's not extraterrestrials. That only leaves one other option. The craft is real, which I think that it is.
Okay, I was going to ask you.
It's not extraterrestrials. That only leaves one other option. You only got one other thing. And that's that it's human. That it's human craft. That it's military craft. And they've been trying to cover that up for a really long time.
So what do you... What do you think of Bob Lazar then? Because he's one of these guys who, to bring back Rogan, he kind of broke the internet with his stuff. And it just, to me, seems like he's one of those guys that may be really honest about what he saw, but was misled in a way, or maybe he's full of shit. But he's making it sound like this can't be human from things that he saw and these elements that are undiscovered and stuff like that. But then again, did he really say that? Or am I just left with that impression?
That's an important question. I think that it's a possibility that Bob Lazar did see something. He was showing something.
Mm-hmm.
But again, people are shown things, not given any explanation for them, so that they'll go out into the public and talk about it and speculatory discussion about it and theorize about it, which then gets everybody on board with those theories and those speculations.
Because they even knew that he was showing his friends, like, oh, I'm going to take you to the edge of the desert and we're going to watch these flying. And they caught him. I don't know if he used the term flying saucers. God damn it. I almost just did it. But he saw these craft and he would show his friends and they caught him, right? And they said, oh, slap on the wrist. Don't do this again. So, yeah, they want him to tell people.
Yeah, that's what happened. And one thing that's really interesting is that I remember Bob Lazar mentioning within his story that he was under the impression that at least one of the craft that he saw was dug up in an archaeological dig, which makes a lot of sense to me because everyone wants to talk about, oh, crash retrieval, this, it's a crash retrieval. We seen it, it fell from the sky, we went and investigated, another country seen it on radar and came out and found it, and we went and picked it up, reverse engineered it, and that's how we came out with these craft. That doesn't have to be the case. See, they do double speak, and they hide definitions for words within other words. crash retrieval doesn't mean, well, it doesn't have to mean that it happened in modern times. Like if me and you picked up right now, we went to Iraq, right? Or we went to Afghanistan or somewhere in the Middle East, Syria, right? So we went down to the Syrian desert and we decided to take a team of archaeologists with us. We excavate all this stuff. We find something that is strange, seems like a technology. It's in the shape of some sort of craft. That is a crash retrieval. Doesn't matter how much time has passed in between finding the thing and when it came down. It's still a crash retrieval. So that's what I think. If the crash retrieval stuff, if it's not just completely made up, then they found it in archaeological digs and it's from a previous civilization back who knows how long ago.
So we could be reverse engineering ancient technology, ancient human technology is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, because this just opens up a whole other can of worms, because you get this thing in sci-fi that's really common, and it's that the aliens are us from the future. But yeah, us from the past is a whole new spin on that.
I think that is way more plausible than extraterrestrials coming from outer space.
And time traveling.
Time traveling, or somehow being a very advanced civilization, but then somehow crashing. It never made any sense to me at all. Like, you're a highly sophisticated, advanced species that is able to travel a vast distance, but then you get to Earth and you crash your craft?
Yeah, they were there coming in on fumes. They'd been drinking the whole way, and they just couldn't keep the craft straight once they got to where. Yeah, that doesn't make. I never thought of it like that. That's funny.
But I mean, that makes sense. And if you take into consideration how many times has some sort of civilization been here, how advanced were they? You know, because when people think of an advanced civilization, they don't think of it in the right terms. They think of an advanced civilization as on the same trajectory that we're currently on. Mm-hmm. That doesn't have to be the case. It could be a completely different kind of advanced civilization.
And something that would explain an element that we had never seen before making it here, if it was a crash retrieval from that long ago. Yeah, sorry, I was just thinking out loud, basically, because once you think of it like that, what you just said about it just being from way back then, everything falls in line, really.
And you wouldn't be able to figure it out. Because I guarantee, let's just fast forward 200 years into the future right now. Let's take a vision quest to 200 years in the future. Do you think any of this shit's going to work?
Of course not, yeah.
Like, everything that we have right now is going to be obsolete. No one's going to know how to work any of this stuff. If someone finds a freaking iPhone 200 years in the future, they're going to be like, what is this? I don't know what this is. One, we don't have the adapters. You'd be able to freaking even plug it into anything. And you can see the evidence of this just in the past 25 years. Started out with floppy disks. Mm-hmm. Store your data on in your computer. Or play or put documents on or whatever. Now, no one uses floppy disks. If you had a floppy disk right now that had top secret information on it, good luck.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to be able to use it. It's obsolete. No one even has a floppy disk drive anymore. And that's just 25 years ago. So the way that our technology is progressing at such a rapid rate, things that first came out are no longer usable. So imagine 200 years in the future, how technologically advanced things are going to be. the things that we're using now, when in even 30 years from now, is going to be obsolete.
Yeah.
This stuff's going to be like a dinosaur. Your computer is going to be a dinosaur.
Well, and it makes me wonder, like, if Elon has his way and the majority of the population chip up, then yeah, physical devices are going to be obsolete. Just like what you're talking about with storage. Most people do store on the cloud now. I mean, your everyday man, pictures, all that stuff. So yeah, it's on a physical server somewhere. But yeah, it's just going to be pretty obsolete, especially if he does get his chips and heads and you are the device at that point. So yeah, these things are going to be, I don't know. You're saying 30 years? That's pretty plausible that we won't even have smartphones by then.
Well, I mean, that's been the whole setup from, you know, the transgender LGBTQ stuff.
From transgender to transhuman?
That's exactly right. That's what it is. That's the agenda. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and you wondered why Tavistock has been pushing this shit since like the fucking way before David Bowie even, you know, where you got in that androgynous push to kind of like a soft entrance into where we are today.
And in 20 years, whenever all the kids that have been brainwashed in these public schools and told that they can be whatever they want, they can identify as whatever they want, and that it's acceptable to change their gender and be a male if they're female, or be a female if they're male. When it comes time to introduce cybernetics onto the human population, it'll be easy.
Well, it'll be preferable to a lot of these people who have chemically castrated themselves and they're now asexual because of the hormone replacement that they all went through. It's going to look better to be like a digital being, and your body's just fucking shot now, so why not?
That, and they would have gotten around all of the laws to do that, because now in some states and in some places, kids don't even have to have their parents' permission to start some sort of transitioning process.
In some states, the parents can get the kids taken away from them if they aren't on board with that.
That's right. So they're usurping all the laws right now, skirting around it, finding a back door. So whenever those kids are old enough, they're going to be like, oh yeah, don't you want a brain chip implant? Don't you want to be, don't you want to be telepathic? Like, don't you want a freaking cyborg arm? You know, oh, we don't have a liver transplant for you, but what we do have is a cybernetic liver that we can put in you that'll work even better than a real liver. And that's what, because I did a show the other day with the lady Lauren Anton, and I was searching for this Alex Jones clip that you were mentioning earlier that was very difficult to find. And I listened to that entire interview, that entire 5-hour conversation. It's an incredible conversation between Alex Jones and Joe Rogan, but he was talking about how his dad was involved in this DARPA program to create cyborgs. Human cyborgs.
This is Alex Jones' father.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me. Like whenever I heard that in 2019, like soon as it came out, and I'd always put that in the back of my head. I was like, huh. This is really interesting.
The same episode where he was talking about chimeras with the human pig hybrids too, and then
yes,
that episode is the one that, you know, it's not really pushed. Everything he said, Joe was making Jamie pull it up, and then the guy that was given a Democrat that was talking about like abortions after the kid's born. It was one of the most provocative episodes they've done together. So that makes sense why you couldn't find it.
I tried to I typed in the entire title because I went to YouTube. I tried to type in Joe Rogan, Alex Jones. Only two of them popped up. I searched and searched and searched, but I didn't have the name of the episode to be able to type in. I just remembered them doing it. I even tried. Then when I found out the name of the episode, I even tried to type it in to YouTube. It didn't pop up. It didn't come up. They're suppressing the shit out of that entire episode. But then when I typed it into Google, it was the first thing that popped up. So I had to have the title, the name title, which is Joe Rogan Experience, Alex Jones Returns. You have to type that into Google, and then it'll pop up. Don't try typing it into YouTube. It won't come up. Unless my search engine is just super wacky, but I don't think that was the case, because I tried to rephrase the Google search at least 10 times to try and find it. I even typed in the dialogue because I had remembered exactly what Alex Jones said in the interview with Joe Rogan. Didn't pop up. So they really want that episode hidden. And that line with him talking about his dad working on cyborgs was really a throwaway line, and but it always just stuck with me. I was like, and no one really made any comments on that, but that explains a lot in the agenda of what they were trying to push, because everything is dual use. And the way that Alex Jones talked about it, he was like, they were using it for military purposes, right? That they were creating these human cyborgs to infiltrate into other countries, which made sense because I would have been at I don't know how old Alex Jones is, but it probably at least would have been at the end of the Cold War.
Yeah, they say he's born in 73, so yeah. And his dad, wasn't his dad like a dentist or something? Who had all these crazy CIA connections and DARPA connections?
Yeah, so I mean, the 70s was during the Cold War. Well,
yeah. I mean, it's
as well. So it makes sense that they would want to create these human cyborgs to go and infiltrate into other countries and then bring back information.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then it turned into, well, we'll just put these human cyborgs out in the public.
Yeah, I remember Jason Burmis was talking a while back about how everything Neuralink can do that they're excited about, you can do with the wearables, but they want it in you for a reason. Like, it can't just be something you can take off like a shirt at the end of the day. They've got to have it in you to get their agenda through. And I always thought that was pretty interesting, because I think they've just recently put it in a paralyzed veteran, and he's playing chess now or some shit. It's the big thing with Neuralink. And I keep seeing stories like maybe it failed, but it's hard to keep up with it. They kind of just keep it right on the periphery right now.
Well, that's another thing that they do is they use certain people as like a patsy for the technology to be released when they've had it for a really long time.
Yeah.
And then they just give it to somebody that's a public figure and make it seem like they're the ones that created it.
I mean, he's brought us so much that he didn't create. I love looking into Elon's past because he's famous for buying into companies that have already got their main product out, and then he rewrites the history of the company. He started that shit with PayPal, and the formula has been repeated. SpaceX is really the only thing that he built from the ground up out of all his major stuff. And that's got to tell you something too, that SpaceX is his baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the way that it, and when you look at, do you remember that story of the lady on the plane? That
motherfucker's not real?
That brings in a completely different...
Is that not who you're talking about?
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I always kind of believed her. I don't know why.
She doesn't seem to be faking it. She looks like she's hammered and terrified.
Yeah, I always thought that one was
Well, it's like what you were talking about when you put an idea into the, collective, then it starts repeating. I remember after that woman's video came out, you start seeing it in like Asian airplanes, like people freaking out saying, I'm from the something parallel dimension and it's all going to collapse right now. And it's just like on Twitter, there's like one of those videos a week for a while after her. So it was a trend.
And that's what they do with things that were real from the beginning. So then they tack on a bunch of made up nonsense garbage to make it look like it's all made up nonsense garbage.
Yeah, muddy the waters.
That's a tactic that is used all the time, but they do it for everything. And sometimes they can even know something real might happen before that, so then they put out a bunch of fake information before the real thing comes out, so it works both ways.
Mm-hmm. Now, what do you think about Dwight D. Eisenhower and the legend around that deal that he supposedly made? What do you think is behind that?
Well, that gets into the whole Paul Benowitz affair and the mis and disinformation that was given directly to Paul Benowitz in the late 60s and then, the late 70s, 1979. Sorry, I got so much stuff in my head. I'm sorry if I mess up some dates or times or names or whatever.
We'll give you some leeway if you're within 10 years. Well.
Yeah, I'm normally way more spot on, but I had just woken up an hour before we started this show, so I'm not quite with it yet. But anyway, that gets into the Paul Benowitz events and all the things that surround him in the late 70s. Paul Benowitz, he lived in close to Kirkland Air Force Base in New Mexico. He founded this research and scientific place called Thunder Scientific. It was a small family business with his wife, and they would develop high-powered instruments for NASA and for the Air Force. He was also worked for the Air Force as a communications person during World War II. So during the 70s, Paul Benowitz, he became a member of a research organization, which was a civilian UFO investigation group, and on cattle mutilations.
Okay.
And cattle mutilations have become associated with UFOs during the 70s. And this cattle mutilation group was basically ran by the intelligence community, and an attorney, R.E. Thompson, which was a U.S. Senator, U.S. Senator Harrison Schmidt, they held these public cattle mutilation meetings in the late 70s. And Paul Benowitz was one of the people that attended one of these cattle mutilations that were set up by the intelligence community to find out what people thought about cattle mutilations, if they thought that it was connected to extraterrestrials. Now, some say that the meeting that Paul Benowitz attended was where he was first introduced to these government agents, because they basically set up the entire meeting. So, which is important because Benowitz later, he listed July of 1979 as the beginning of a personal study into UFOs, because Benowitz reportedly began filming strange lights and recording strange radio signals over Kirkland Air Force Base. So Paul Benowitz would go out his back door. He could literally see Kirkland Air Force Base from his back patio. He would see these two strange lights hovering above the ground. They would zip around and float up off of the ground and then zip around the mountain and all that. And, common sense would tell you, if you're seeing something over a military base, it's the freaking military.
Right.
Like, give me a break. All these people that claim to see things, like, there was a gentleman that I was talking to, a contact in the desert, that says that he lives outside of Area 51, and he's filming all this strange activity. I was like, bro, Area 51 is a freaking military base. It's the military, dude. It's strange military craft.
He's
all it
convinced that it's extraterrestrial.
So Paul being a radio expert, but yes, that guy that lives outside of Area 50. Well, he's not 100% convinced. He thinks that it could be a mixture of both because, like you were mentioning with
Lazar.
Well, not with Lazar, but the President Eisenhower
Oh, right.
saying people believing that there's a contract between extraterrestrials and aliens, and that they had this whole treaty set up to build an underground military base. So the extraterrestrials are working with the military. That's been an idea that has been.
Well, Ike has a granddaughter that goes on like coast to coast now. She's an elderly woman herself now, but she claims that she's channeled by some alien being, and she talks to her grandpa, and it's just like, and she's on coast to coast, so it's just like keeping this shit going for generations. But anyway, I don't want to get too far off Paul Benowitz, but
yeah, that's the regurgitation aspect of this. And then when people hear this third and fourth hand, it's like Sean Kirkpatrick from the head of Arrow coming out with that article and be like, this is all circular reporting. This is all people that have heard this from second and third hand sources that are regurgitating it and talking about it. And it's a revolving door of theories and speculations that were never proven to be true in the first place. So Paul Benowitz, being a radio expert, worked for the military as a radio engineer. He was well versed in radio technology. He then decided to try and listen into communications at Kirkland Air Force Base to try and figure out what these strange lights were, if the military knew what these strange lights were. So then he decoded a bunch of transmissions and put together that it was about technology, and the technology wasn't from here. So began his whole journey into the extraterrestrial realm. So in October of 1980, Benowitz contacted Kirkland Air Force Base to report his findings. Like you would think any, patriotic person would do. If you're seeing something strange, then you would contact the Air Force Base. And he's worked for the Air Force as well, so he had a good rapport with them. So he contacts the Air Force Base. So at this point, Benowitz is on. He's like, this has got to be extraterrestrial. It's definitely extraterrestrials. There's no other, but he's so far away. And Bill Moore, I'm jumping all over the place here, but Bill Moore was sent to him by a gentleman named Richard Doty, and Bill Moore actually went to Paul Benowitz's house, and Benowitz pulled out his binoculars and was like, I see these craft all the time. Here, look, there's one right here. And then Bill Moore grabs the binoculars and also looks at it and was like, oh, well, yeah, that's kind of strange. But then Bill Moore gets in his car and drives up around the mountain to see if he can get a closer look at it. And it's freaking military helicopters. It's not UFOs. It's not extraterrestrials. It's literally the military doing exercises. But apparently nobody else did that. It is bought into what Benowitz was saying about UFOs and extraterrestrials. So in November of 1980, Benowitz briefed the people at Kirkland Air Force Base, the military personnel, the generals and all that. And in order to figure out if anything that Benowitz had was real, or some of the generals thought that maybe it was a Soviet threat, or that it was another country or somebody else that was planning to invade the base. So to figure out more of what Paul Benowitz had and the information that he had in the decoded messages that he was getting from Kirkland Air Force Base wasn't a threat, they put him in contact with who I just mentioned, a man by the name of Richard Doty, which is an AFOSI, Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Paul not really knowing exactly what he had because he didn't analyze the radio transmissions properly. Richard Doty coming to his house, analyzing it pretty quickly, figuring out that what he had was top secret radio transmissions from the Air Force Base. Didn't have anything to do with extraterrestrials. But Richard Doty came in and convinced him that it was extraterrestrials. He realized that the footage that he had of these supposed UFOs were top secret military aircraft that he was capturing. So then he started planning ideas and confirming Paul Benowitz's theory that they're extraterrestrials. And not telling him for a fact, which I've had Richard Doty on my show, before we've talked
Really?
about it. Yeah. He wasn't telling Paul Benowitz that this is like factual. He's like, oh well, that's really interesting, Paul. You might be right. And then to that's an AFOSI special agent from the Air Force basically confirming that he's right about the extraterrestrials, but not outright telling them for a fact. He's just planting the seed that maybe what he has, that he has the information that the radio transmissions could possibly be coming from extraterrestrials. And with Paul Benowitz being a World War II vet, it was, I would imagine, very easy to convince him to not talk about it for the time being. Like, Paul, you owe this to your country, my friend, to not say anything about this to anyone. Keep all this information to yourself. But it wasn't just Doty that was doing this. There was other people that were involved. So I don't put a lot of I told Doty in our interview, I was like, I don't put a lot of the blame on you. There was several people that was involved with all of this. It was pretty much all the people at Kirkland Air Force Base was doing this to him. So after Paul showed the footage that he captured of the strange craft, which was a top secret experimental aircraft, a general of the Air Force stood up and said, Paul, you got some pretty convincing evidence there. What would you like the Air Force to do about it? And Paul wanted a grant. He wanted a grant to continue the study of UFOs on the base, and he wanted a grant to continue his contact with aliens that he claimed that he had. And this caught the Air Force generals and the people that were a part of this meeting really off guard. Absolutely. And we've established that Air Force Office of Special Investigators were involved, like Richard Doty, and all the Air Force personnel were involved in the briefing and pushing Paul Benowitz in this direction of extraterrestrials and UFOs, when he was really getting top secret classified footage of experimental aircraft that the Air Force was working on and radio transmissions from the Air Force Base. But another agency was involved. What happened was that Paul was, while he was picking up these signals from Kirkland Air Force Base, he didn't really know that was the case. He thought that these signals were coming from extraterrestrials. So the NSA had posted up across the street from Paul Benowitz's house, and they would directly beam radio signals into Paul Benowitz's antenna into his house to make Paul Benowitz believe that what he was getting was from extraterrestrials. They even went as far as to break into Paul Benowitz's house, replaced his computer with an NSA modified computer. The computer had software on it, had software installed onto it to decode the messages that they were sending Paul from outside of his house in the way that they wanted Paul to see them.
So this is like he's Agent Mulder, and they're the smoking man's people fucking with them. That's crazy. That's like movie shit.
It is. That's what they were doing. And in these messages that Paul thought that he was receiving from extraterrestrials, which was really the freaking NSA, a lot of the things that they were telling him are regurgitations from this community that are still talked about to this very day, right? That they're extraterrestrials, are from a planet that is dying, they're from a planet with no water, that they're here for our resources, that they're here to take over Earth, and they only trust Paul because Paul was the chosen one, right? And all kinds of other stuff, which a lot of the things, again, that were talked about with Paul believing that he's in communication with extraterrestrials through his computer, you know, when they're completely made up and fabrications made up by the NSA. And then in 1980, the state police in New Mexico, did you have something?
No, I was just going to say, you might get to this, but I was just going to say, is this gentleman still alive today?
No, he passed away, I believe, in 2003. Yeah, he passed away in 2003.
The Richard Doty guy that you've talked to, he must be kind of up there in years.
Yeah, I think he's late 50s, I believe.
Okay, so he's not. So he wouldn't have been a younger guy then when all this was going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the state police in New Mexico, and if you thought this was bad, it gets even worse, because state police in New Mexico received a report from a woman and a lady naming herself Myrna Henson, describing a story that involved extraterrestrial aliens, bright lights, herds of cattle, seeing abductions, cattle being abducted into craft. Police then referred the case to a gentleman that was also at the cattle mutilation conference in 1979 named Gabe Valdez, who they knew to be the cattle mutilation guy for the interest in the cases and going to these cattle mutilation meetings. Valdez then in turn contacted Paul Benowitz. So in 1980, Myrna Henson and her son traveled to Albuquerque to meet with Benowitz, stayed in his home. Henson explained to Benowitz that on May 5th, 1980, while she was driving with her son near Eagle Nest, New Mexico, they had witnessed two large silent objects that were hovering above a meadow, right? And then they contacted a gentleman, Paul Benowitz contacted a gentleman named Leo Sprinkle, who was a psychiatrist and a professor at the University of Wyoming.
That is such a name of a professor. Professor
Leo
Sprinkle.
Leo Sprinkle. Give me sprinkle that salt on there. So Benowitz arranged for Sprinkle to fly to Albuquerque to hypnotize Henson. So when Sprinkle arrived, Henson and Benowitz...
Okay, now we're getting into regression like you were promising.
Yes. So Benowitz has been being hit with this all this nonsense, and they come to the conclusion that the regressions need to be taking place in Benowitz's Lincoln Town Car that's parked inside of the family garage, and he had all the car windows covered with aluminum foil. Paul's literally out of his mind at this point. You know, you got the NSA right across the street, beaming signals into your house, into your antenna. They broke into your home, replaced your computer with the NSA, which he's not aware of any of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing. That's an important thing. He's not aware that the NSA has done this. He's not aware that the NSA has his house bugged. He's not aware that the Air Force has been lying to him this entire time, right? Would you not be paranoid? You know, you got the freaking Air Force telling you that you're right about the aliens, but you can't tell anyone. You got the NSA sending the signals into your home to decode messages to make you believe that you're in communication with extraterrestrials, is telling you all this stuff. So Sprinkle decided to then regress this woman named Myrna Henson in the tinfoiled out car in Paul Benowitz's garage. And her first regression, she reported information of a cow being sucked up by a UFO tractor beam spaceship. And then on May 11th and May 12th, 1980, under hypnosis again, Henson reported recollections of being abducted and taken to an underground base with body parts floating in vats. That's when we get into the full swing of the Dulce base. The Dulce base with Phil Schneider. I'm sure people.
Oh yeah, he lost his fingers in a razor gun war with the Archon, or the whatever the fuck they were called, the Dracos. Yeah, yep. That's all fun stuff. That's like old school coast to coast AM.
Yep. So during the session, another thing happened too, is that Myrna Henson also mentioned Roswell, New Mexico. But the problem with that is that Roswell, no one in the public had connected Roswell to UFO folklore yet, which is a perfect setup for Bill Moore's book that I was mentioning earlier, that Bill Moore went to Benowitz's house and then drove out there to the mountain to see that it was just military helicopters that Paul Benowitz was seeing. Bill Moore wrote a book on Roswell called The Roswell Incident just a few months later in October of 1980, which was all myths and disinformation about alien spacecraft crashing in Roswell, which popularized the myth and the lore and brought it to the forefront of ufology. And then later on, Bill Moore stands up in front of the MUFON conference in 1989 and tries to tell everyone that it's all made up garbage nonsense. and they boo him off of the stage.
Yeah, you can't turn on that crowd, man. Shit.
So he basically says in that, which I'm going to do a part 2. I've done the first 2 hours of that MUFON conference where he's up there talking, but it's a 5-hour long interview. I'm going to do part 2 here soon, hopefully this Saturday on my channel. I've just been really busy with the Contact in the Desert and trying to work on the second documentary, so I really haven't had the time, but I'm going to finish that up because everything that Bill Moore is talking about at that conference is like timeless.
And they treated him like it was Dylan Goes Electric, you know.
And no one ever heard from him again after that. He just disappeared. He's gone. So back to Myrna Henson really quickly. So Myrna Henson is Paul Benowitz setup, because that's exactly what this was. It was a giant setup with this lady Myrna Henson to get the lore and the mythology rolling, because they knew Paul Benowitz would tell everyone, and this would snowball into a big bunch of nonsense.
So is she like some chick who got a speeding ticket and couldn't afford it, and they're like, hey, you know what you can do? You want to just have us sweep this up? Probably something bigger than a speeding ticket, but how would they get someone like that? You'd have to... Or she could have been an agent, supposedly. I mean, do you know?
I think that she's an agent. Okay. Richard Doty says that what she was describing with this base was an advanced Air Force munitions bunker. Because the way that she described it was almost identical to what the Air Force munitions bunker looked like. Because Richard Doty went out to this... Air Force munitions bunker, and the same types of things that she described. Besides the body parts floating in vats, everything else was the same. But he was like, well, I don't know how she got into the military Air Force munitions bunker, but a lot of people tried to get involved with the Myrna Henson case. Alan Hynek, sorry, Paul Hynek is his son. Alan Hynek, the Project Blue Book guy, tried to get involved with the Myrna Henson case, and then he was threatened to be federally prosecuted, so he backed away. But I think that it's because Gabe Valdez's son later on comments on this and says that it was a setup, and that it was very easy for them to do because they found all these bugs and all these plants and all these listening devices within his dad's home. So the government was listening to everything that they were doing 24/7. I mean, these people are literally driving Paul out of his mind to the point that he was thinking that he was going to be being attacked by aliens. You know, it's a really sad story. And Benowitz even armed up with guns and tinfoil to protect his family.
Yeah, the fucking thing you said about when they do the regression, and that's when you know someone's going a little wacky. They start literally using the tinfoil hat.
Yeah, and it was all... It all came to be because of government mis and disinformation. That's literally where all the tinfoil hat stuff came from. No one has any idea. It came from government.
All you really need is a house with lead paint on it at the end of the day.
That's blue paint, right?
Yeah, if you don't want the laser beams to start your house on fire. So I got a couple more questions. I don't know how much time you have, but what is, and if this is like a little too much because we edge in these circles of the podcasters and stuff, but I just wanted to know what your take on this this huge thing that's happening with Ryan Bledsoe, where there's this new movement of like, you can summon these things. It's kind of like what, gosh, I always forget his name. Stephen Greer kind of started this in the mainstream,
right? With the C5 protocols, yeah.
And now and I don't want to just say this is how you feel, but we've mentioned mental illness before, and if I hear about this guy, Bledsoe's father, having these visions and then they just roll with it, it makes me wonder if that's a possibility. But anyway, do you think this is an authentic movement, or do you think this is totally astroturfed?
Seems like a cult, doesn't it?
It very much seems like a cult. and I know people who are balls deep in it. So it's kind of like, what do? You know, I don't want to you don't walk up to a Christian and scream that Jesus isn't real.
Yeah, it definitely has all the hallmarks of a cult. You know, it seems a lot like the Billy Meyer story. Are you familiar with the Billy Meyer story?
Refresh my memory, because I think I've heard you talk about it, if not other people.
So the Billy Meyer story is he's one of the supposedly in contact with these Pleiadian extraterrestrials, and then they come down and give him all this information, and he has all this. It supposedly has like technology from these aliens. There's like a whole cult that was formed around this with like a compound where people could come and live, and then they get endowed and imbued with the wisdom of Billy Meyer, and he's the only true one and only contactee from these Pleiadians. And then it turns out all the pictures that he's taken of these craft are all fake. They're all trash can lids on like wires.
Flying saucers.
Yep.
So
that's what it kind of reminds me of, and the direction that it's kind of going, because we haven't had a good cult for a minute yet. I haven't had a good cult going on, but I think UFO cult, we haven't had one for a while. I think the last one was Love Has Won, which was in Crestone, Colorado, with Amy Carlson, that claimed that she was the direct reincarnation of God, and that she was here to send the 144,000 people into the sun.
Wonder how that worked out.
No, she ended up dying. She died of cirrhosis of the liver and excessive colloidal silver ingestion.
Oh, this is Mother. What do they call
Mother
it?
God.
Yes, so
Mother God.
I was on a panel a couple weeks back, and they told me to watch this documentary because I made a colloidal silver crack where we were making fun of like the pushing of supplements and conspiracy, and she goes, "Oh, do you know who Mother God is?" So this is new to me. I'm really gonna have to check this out. I know there's a good doc about it.
Yeah, I did a show on it last year before
I'll just watch your show then.
Yeah, I didn't even know that that they were doing a documentary on it, but it was.
I think it's pretty recent that they did.
Yeah, I watched the documentary on it.
Oh, you did? Okay,
yeah,
so you've seen it.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. They did a really good job with it. A girl that I know was an information consultant on that documentary, so I think it's definitely worth a watch. It was really good and lays a lot of it out. But yeah, that's the latest one, and she really upped the ante on a lot of it. She said that she was in communication with Robin Williams.
Yes.
And that Robin Williams appeared to her at night in her bed, and that Robin Williams was a part of the Galactic Federation. And literally with her, that's where all the Galactic Federation stuff came from in 2005.
Okay.
She's the one that popularized all the Galactic Federation stuff.
And now it's all just tongue-in-cheek, really.
Yeah, and she said that Robin Williams would assist her in her Zoom call healings along with the Galactic Federation. It's just like wild stuff. Like she literally started getting out of her mind like really quickly. So and all the people that were around her were just encouraging it and feeding into it, and it literally killed her. It's another sad story.
Yeah, well, you're right. We are due for a good UFO cult, and maybe, I mean, is this why you go to like Contact in the Desert and stuff? This is like you want to make some contacts with other people that are into this whole thing you're researching?
Well, I like to go because it's a good way to communicate with people in person and
right.
Talk to other people and kind of network. And I mean, there's a few good people that I like that are normally presenting at the conferences. Andrew Collins is one of them. I don't mind Richard Dolan. I think he's all right. There's Dr. Paul Smith. Russell Targ was there this year. So there's a few people that I think that are on the right track with stuff, but it's mostly for networking and talking with people and meeting with people in person, because you don't really get that opportunity that often unless you actually travel to where the individual lives, so it's a good way to talk to people in person, do some in-person interviews. I like doing that. I like being in person with people, and being able to talk with people in person is like makes me feel good, because a lot of our work is done over the internet on like Zoom and like on StreamYard. We're not like next to each other, so it's a different kind of feeling. You get a different energy from people when you're in person.
I've never had an in-studio interview myself, but I just found out that the Frankenskies guy lives where I do. You know who he is? Frankenskies? Chemtrail documentary?
No. Oh, yes, I am familiar, but I can't place him. Yeah,
I don't know his name either. I know that he's here, and I know that he's open to interviews, but he also makes literal tinfoil hats, and you can order them online, and people buy them because he's all about like the 5G and everything, and he's probably right about some of that shit. But well, man, this has been a really good talk. Do you have anything else you want to touch on?
Just that you got to use common sense and critical thinking with a lot of this stuff, and just don't believe everything that you hear from these people, because it's a regurgitation after regurgitation. It's a belief that has no backing from the very beginning, that has been turned into something that was never originally supposed to be. And that's a really big problem and a really big issue. I'm not saying to like not listen to things that you think are interesting. Just take things with like a grain of salt.
Don't get dogmatic about it.
Yeah, you don't have to listen to something and then automatically take it on as your belief in your belief system. You can just kind of tuck it away, put it back there on the back burner, and just remember it for the future. Because there's a lot of people that are ripping off other people. There's a lot of people that don't, cite other people's work whenever they're talking about their work, when it's blatant that they're talking about their work, and they don't want to mention the person because they want to make it seem like that they're the ones that created it and they're the ones that came up with it, when it's not. They've just read it somewhere and they've incorporated it into their story and into their narrative. Like it's not an honorable thing to do. And
that's how history books are written these days too. Pretty much.
Yeah, and on that as well, the story of Paul Benowitz is heavily documented. It's documented in the book Project Beta, the story of Paul Benowitz and the national security and the creation of the modern UFO myth. Mark Pinkerington's book about the project, also called Mirage Men, which was published in 2010, and then the book was adapted in 2013. Documentary under the same name, Mirage Men. It's like the people, like, they don't want to. And it was also in another book called Clear Intent, the government cover-up of the UFO experience. So people don't want to credit people for their work, and they just want to, make it seem like that they did it all on their own, when that's not how any of this stuff works. I mean, if you're doing research into something, you're looking at somebody else's work, and you're using their work. I mean, that's the definition of research.
Well, and I appreciate you giving all of your sources and citations, because I usually have a fucking notebook sitting right next to me. I'm just going to have to go back and listen to this recording again and just jot everything down. And people listening or watching, I hope that you do the same thing, because it's always good. And I've been interviewing a lot more people lately that bring receipts like you did today. So and you're a young guy. You've already got some really good work under your belt, and it sounds like I'm pretty excited about this thing you're working on right now. I would love to have you back when you've got that, Oh,
ready. Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna be doing all the rounds.
Yeah, because that's such fascinating topics there, and like a perfect blend of everything you're working on.
Yeah, it involves pop culture, it involves the CIA, it involves the music industry, it involves the film industry, it involves movies, it involves directors, involves LSD, the hippie movement. It's got all of it in it, and
Do you know how long this is gonna run? Like under 3 hours?
we thought that it was going to hit at around 2 hours, but I'm going to try and shave it down longer because it's hard to keep people's attention with a long documentary like that, and which I know some people really do like long form content now. They like to sit down and listen to it, but I'm going to try and keep it at like an hour and a half or hour and 40 minutes. Because of all the editing and all the things that I'm going to need to do to keep it interesting and keep people's eyes on it is difficult to do for 2 hours. There's only so many ups and downs that you can do within a documentary to keep people's attention on it before they turn it off. So it's going to be difficult to get it down to an hour and a half because there's so much information, so much things that needs to be gone over. But we're going to attempt to do it, and hopefully it'll be done by the end of August. I'm not putting a time on it, a date on it, but
if you take a little bit longer to make it good, I'd say those deadlines, especially when you're your own boss.
Yeah, we're our own boss. We're producing it on our own, and we're distributing it on our own. So we don't really have a time scale, but that's just when I would like it to be out. But if
do you have a title yet?
Yeah, we do. It's not, we haven't revealed the title.
Oh, you don't need to reveal it. I'm just curious myself. But other than that, that sounds like an awesome thing. I can't wait for that. And also, before we go, I want to comment on your shirt because I've just been this whole time thinking there should be a Texas Longhorn skull hanging on the wall behind you because it would just go so well with that shirt for some reason. I feel like I'm in a New Mexican Pueblo.
Yeah, dude, I'm in the wacky shirt phase of my life where I just find a bunch of wacky shirts and put it on.
Yeah,
colorful, and I do need one. That would be great. Just put a freaking one of those taxidermy deers.
There you go.
On my wall. Yeah, with a long bow. Give me some bows back there. But thanks, brother. Appreciate you having me on. If people are interested to check out my work, you can find me on Raised by Giants on YouTube and any and all podcast platforms. And check out my film, JFKX, Solving the Crime of the Century. It's on Amazon Prime and on Tubi for free with ads. So thanks for having me on. Appreciate you, brother. And
thanks for coming on. Yeah, I look forward
hope
to
everyone enjoyed it.
Oh, they're going to. And if they're not listening right now, if they didn't enjoy it, so they can fuck off. But yeah, they didn't stick with us. All right, man. Well, I hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thanks, my friend.
All right, we'll be in touch, bud. Talk to you later.
But I'd be all